another Mobile Monday event. Tonight's the future of the connected car. So, a little excited about the new toy and platform that everyone gets to work on. And so we decided to kind of like scope out what the connected car it's going to be looking like in the future. For those who don't know me, my name is Tapia. I've been doing meetups like this since 1999, through up and down the West Coast, Seattle, LA, and here. I'm part of industry, so I am definitely not an event organizer, but it's just an end to a means. And the means is to get to know you guys, but also understand what is happening in the industry per se. So I've been working in mobile startups for a very long time, and now part of an accelerator and investment community. So the agenda tonight, we'll go through a welcome. I have a couple of slides to go through, and then we'll have Mahesh will do a keynote from Tizen/Intel, and I don't know if you want to wear he's on the Intel side of the Tizen project. And then we'll go into panel. So a little bit about Mobile Monday. How many first time tonight? Mobile Monday. Wow. Okay, how many people in the automotive industry or connected car? Okay, cool. Wow. And then is everyone else developers that are new? Who are the new folks? Wow. Oh, people looking or curious about the auto connected car. Is that why you guys perfect? Okay. Cool. So if you haven't been to a Mobile Monday before, we're just like a normal meetup, but we're a little bigger and a little older than most here in the Valley. We're a nonprofit. Some of the bigger cities in the States are Austin, Chicago, Silicon Beach, which is LA. They're just a little jealous of us, I think. They don't have the Silicon name. Boston, Seattle, New York, DC. But we're also like in Miami, and we're in Philadelphia, and we're in some really smaller towns. I guess they're called some smaller towns, but not quite. But overall, we're about 140 cities and growing, which is pretty big. And I think, we have Mumbai, right? Mumbai's in town. All right, who is? Wait. Okay, who else from Mobile Monday? I think, and we also have Mobile Monday St. Petersburg. I think so there's a couple of guys out here. So we have, interesting enough, the Bay Area is kind of like a bus stop when it comes to the tech world. Pretty much everyone comes by here. So from the 140 cities, we always, almost on a weekly basis, have someone coming through town. So here's kind of like what is the audience really composed of? And it's really about a third of you are business development. How many people are business development? Yeah. Product and marketing. You guys, product guys. Developers, you write code. Okay, who's in media? Okay, and bloggers count. Okay, for this one. All right. And then we have designers. I know there's always a few, the unicorns. And then we have venture, and the venture people are shy because they're like, I don't want to know I have money. So, but it's okay, guys. We're pretty active. So we do 3 kind of events per month. So this is kind of like our monthly meetup. Everyone's invited. We do labs, and that's really tech focused. So it's just for the engineering developer community. And we also do dinners, and then the dinners are very private. They're not announced. It's all invite only. But if you're curious about any of these, you can always feel free to contact us. Go to the website, MobileMonday.us, and you can find out more there. So how to find us? So if a friend recommended you, etc., MobileMonday.us is probably the best way. Otherwise, you'll find us on Meetup. Our Twitter is MomoSV. We're also we're on the Facebook, and we're on the YouTube. So you can always find us there. The team. So I head up the group here in Silicon Valley. Ryan, my right-hand man, is out here somewhere. I'm back in the corner. Monica's been great. So all the food and drinks and stuff that you're enjoying tonight, Monica has gone and basically gone and collected. We also have Chelsea helps on our events. You'll see Stephanie running around. That's Stephanie here. And she always turns red when I call her out because she's shy. But she helps a lot with our social media. So, and since bringing her on, I mean, we get 100, 200 tweets, which is great. I was like, wow, there's so much activity going on. So if you guys want to be in the conversation, watch out for at MomoSV, and you'll see, and also hashtag MobileMonday. And then John Lin is our historian, who's over here, and we have which contributes a lot to our YouTube channel. So we have almost over 50, maybe, I think, of these events all recorded. So yeah, John's been basically recording and editing all these. So tonight, I also want to say thanks to our sponsors. So on Twitter, at Tizen Project, so you can tweet at Tizen Project. Thanks to PubNub, and I think they also have a demo out there. HARMAN News as well. Thanks for their sponsorship for tonight. And I hope you guys. How many people thought some of the companies out in the back were pretty cool? There's some really cool stuff going on. Yeah. So something really quick. So we at MobileMonday started an accelerator program focused on mobile, connected world, etc. Almost 2 years ago, and we just closed our last application and just started our program today, actually. So for the next 12 weeks, we'll be incubating some really cool companies from all around the world. So the team is myself and Ryan, Mike Rahul, which is also kind of a founder of MobileMonday here in the Valley, and Todd Parker, who's a longtime angel investor. And we teamed up to focus on the Momentum Accelerator. We basically are kind of at the beginning of the program right now. It runs for 12 weeks. A lot of hands-on and custom help. Basically, it's funding. We focus on deals. So this is really helping. If you have a startup that's maybe 18 months to 2 years out, this is kind of like the sweet spot of where we like to help you, because we can actually introduce you to Fortune 500 companies and actually have a real serious conversation, as opposed to, well, that's a really cool, nice idea. Talk to us in 12 months to 2 years when you're a little bit more mature. We help with mentorship, exposure, and lots of perks. This is our portfolio from last year. And so the results were, we did 2 classes, 14 companies. It's now almost 20 million plus in total funding for after follow-on funding, which is kind of a more, our program kind of more is a unicorn in itself, because those kind of numbers really never happen. I don't know if it was beginner's luck or if it's the team that helped most of these startups. And this is some that we got. We got Ventures, Google Ventures NEA, SV Angel, some of the top tier investors in the Valley and in the country participated in follow-on investment with our last year's class. Here's the Fortune 500 that we introduced our startups to, plus a ton more to help them grow. Our mentor network, basically, these are folks from industry that help to dedicate time to help the startups in any way they can, whether it's advice, introductions, and even investment themselves. And then here's some of our community partners that without them we couldn't really get the word out. And pretty much with this community list up here, our reach is almost 750,000 folks around the world. What we were looking for is, we still look for awesome teams, mobile focused, mobile first, have a live product, no ideas, no vaporware guys, and also traction. You have to have like some traction in the real world, and then some previous funding, etc. We don't do the first angel in most cases. So the results were so far for 2014. So we had 350 applicants from 45 countries, and we've gone through, we have 8 startups in the hopper from 8 different cities, which is kind of cool. So here they are. We have Appscotch from St. Petersburg, Atuma from Milan, Donor Tap from New York. We have Linksuit from DC, Pixelpin from London, SoftSync from the Bay Area, Swolas from Miami, TechnoRise from Buenos Aires, and Wildfire from Los Angeles. So it took a lot to get to this short list. But then again, we'll be opening up applications for our next round soon. So keep track, momentum.vc. Tell your friends. And so tonight, why the connected car? Basically, we'll be looking at issues around developing for the car, getting inside the car, and what are those challenges like. We'll have an open discussion about Google and Apple, although they're probably not in the room or they're not participating in the panel, but we can at least infer and talk about them because they're probably not here. So, and then security and privacy. What are some of the issues as well, along with being inside the car, and a lot of the legal issues as well that kind of come about. So tonight, here's the panel list. I'll introduce Mahesh, if you want to come up. So give a round of applause to Mahesh. Mahesh is gonna cover a little bit about, one is, how many people here know what Tizen is, right? And people who have heard of Intel and Samsung, and it's so big companies getting together, right, and coming up with another operating system that they own and that they're a part of, and that they're also trying to keep open. Let's mute this one here. I'll just undo the plug. And so Mahesh is wearing his Tizen hat, but also is originally part of the Intel team. And he's going to have a couple of slides tonight to talk about ecosystem, and also, Tizen's getting into cars. Again, in everything, actually, from wearables. And I think, how many people were at the Tizen conference like last month? That's it? Wow. See, we got some work to do. How many people have seen the Samsung Gear 2 wearable?
I have one.
Yeah, see? Yeah, because that runs Tizen, by the way. This is kind of cool. It's one of their first devices. But without further ado, here's Mahesh.
Thank you, Maria, and thanks for your kind introduction. So, first of all, that was a pleasant surprise when I saw a couple of hands, people who attended the conference, but a lot more hands about people who know what Tizen is. So that makes my job tonight a little easier. So I was asked to, talk about Tizen here today, and specifically Tizen in context of Internet of Things, and specifically connected car as an element within Internet of Things. So I'm mostly representing an open source project called Tizen here in this conversation. So don't treat this as an Intel position on anything. It's not an Intel product strategy or doesn't reflect Intel strategy. This purely reflects what the Tizen as an open source project that anybody can participate in. There are a number of people already participating in this open source project, what Tizen represents for the Internet of Things. So with that, before I get deeper into Tizen, there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, a couple of, just to set some context. Not this. So let me kind of submit to you this as a view of Internet of Things. Now, this is not Internet of Things. Almost everybody has a definition for Internet of Things. I'm not religious about this definition. I'm just using this to set a context and to kind of set us up for where we want to go next. So what is really Internet of Things? On the left-hand side, you see a set of smart devices. Why are these devices smart? Because they are devices that are talking to each other, devices that can discover each other, devices that can provision themselves. Then the capability of aggregating these devices into a system of systems in the middle, where these devices are connecting to each other, they're talking to each other, and then taking all the intelligence, all the data, and doing an end-to-end analytics on it so that you can take the data and convert it into a useful information in the form of data analytics. So that kind of represents a very broad brush view of Internet of Things. Connected car is an element, or you can view it in very simple terms as a device, as one of the things of Internet of Things. Now, connected car today mostly is about how do you bring your digital lifestyle into a car and take it out of the car seamlessly. But where car is going in foreseeable future, or not to, in very near future, is where cars can talk to each other, cars can talk to infrastructure. You might have already heard of terms like V2V, V2I, and that's what creates the link of cars into Internet of Things. So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to mention as a context. There's a related another thing that I wanted to kind of mention as a context, which is about open source software. If you go back 10 years, most software products were a box product, where the code, everything related to that product was owned by one company. That fundamentally has changed today. Most of the software products, especially products in the consumer space today, products that are being used by a consumer, are either using open source, partially or fully. Most of the data centers, be it Amazon, be it Yahoo, be it Google, today use open source code. You find open source code in almost any device, watch, phone. There's open source everywhere. And this is a significant shift that has happened in the last decade, where software was always seen as a commercial entity, and it is now, the use of open source software has increased. Now, with those two, things, what's Internet of Things and the increase of open source software, is where the Tizen initiative came in. When we started this couple of years back, we wanted to target specifically those segments of computing industry where there wasn't a presence of big players, right? If you go back 2 years, 3 years, PCs, 300, 400 million units a year, pretty much incumbent ecosystem. Phones were trending the same way, right? So what are those verticals where aggregation of those verticals together would create an economies of scale? So that was our consideration when we started looking at what we should do in Tizen. So that's where the concept of OS of everything came around. With Tizen, what we started to do is, we said, what's the problem of the developer? A developer wants to write an application and try to get it into as many form factors as possible, right? The developer ecosystem around PCs pretty much was well defined. Developer ecosystem around phones, kind of, you knew where we were going 2 years back. But most of these segments, right, wearables, in-vehicle infotainment, TV, this is where the developers wanted to land their applications, but they also want to land it in a way that they don't have to rewrite this application for every other form factor, right? So that's why what we did with Tizen was a very grounds-up effort around building an OS around the principles of HTML5, which gave developers the capability to, truly write once and deploy it on multiple form factors. Now, for those of you who kind of track numbers, they talk about 50 billion devices by 2020. Now, if you actually have a platform, an OS platform, that can allow you to kind of target most of those 50 billion, it becomes highly appealing from a developer's perspective, which was the key reason why we targeted that whatever we do in Tizen, it needs to get whatever functionality resides in the OS, it needs to be exposed to a developer through HTML5. So we talk about some of the key features, and so what we have spent time in last 2 years is, so one of the things you would often hear is a web app is not as well performing like a native app. And how many developers in the room, by the way? So you probably deal with this argument, hey, I can write an application and an HTML file never be as performing as a native app, an app written in C, C++. So our goal here has been in Tizen is how do you make the platform rich enough so that you can get close to native performance as much as possible, and at the same time have a capability of then taking that application across form factors. Tizen already supports 64-bit kernel both for ARM and IA architectures. Another one has been security, right? For example, we're talking connected car here. One of the key differences, for example, between a mobile ecosystem and a connected car ecosystem is the sensitivity to security is very high in a connected car. On a phone, if you download an app, it's a malicious app, it crashes, okay? No harm done. You can't afford that on a car because the liabilities of doing that are high. Those of you who are from OEMs here, car OEMs, know what that liability means. So that's been the reason that there has been a grounds-up approach to build access control into the platform itself. And the other thing, of course, was if you go look into most of the operating systems, the display, the graphics subsystems have been developed over the last 10, 15 years. And we kind of did something different with Tizen, was to develop a graphics subsystem that's actually designed for connected devices, and that's called Valent. So now let me bring this conversation close to automotive. So as I talked about, Tizen is an operating system applies to multiple verticals, and one of those verticals is IVI today, or we call it Tizen IVI, but you can, broadly automotive. The way the OS is structured is there's a core OS which goes into all of these verticals, and on top of that core OS, we call it common actually. On that top of that common, you add IVI specific functionality or IVI specific packages and create a OS for IVI. Similarly, you add TV-specific packages and create an OS for TV. Wearables, same concept. Mobile phone, same concept. But we also had to look at what's the automotive industry actually want? Does it need? I mean, why does an automotive OS need to be different, right? Why can't you take any of the other OSs that are prevalent in the industry right now and apply it to automotive, which, by the way, is organically happening too. But it doesn't address some of the core issues that our automotive industry faces. And I talked to 2 or 3 examples here. Boot, and I know there are people from tier 1 companies here. In a car, when you turn on the ignition, you should be ready to launch your applications in 5 seconds or less. That's kind of the typical, maybe one OEM wants 4 seconds, another wants 6 seconds. I'm kind of taking 5 seconds as a rule of thumb. And not only that, you want your rear view camera to be functional in less than 2 seconds, right? So those are that's a very simple example of why an automotive OS needs to have some grounds up effort to target functionalities like this. Not you take an OS from a different ecosystem where you don't have a requirement of I need to boot in 5 seconds. Similarly, multi-user. If you're driving a car and you have your kid at the back of the car, and you are probably doing navigation, or and the kid might be watching a movie, and you want different set of privileges between your kid and you, right? So it's not only about multi-user; it's about simultaneous multi-user with different privileges. Multiple displays. Why you need an efficient display subsystem, I talked about graphics subsystem, is because typically these days most cars are getting designed with, or at least the high-end cars are getting designed with 3 to 4 subsystems, right? How do you get web applications that have access to low-level data that is sitting on the CAN bus? So we have initiatives going on where we're trying to standardize W3C APIs for what we call as vehicle APIs for vehicles, which basically gives you access to low-level data on the CAN bus, gives you capability like speech to text, text to speech. In fact, those are some of the initiatives we're driving through W3C. Why W3C? Because W3C is where the HTML5 standardization happens. So these are I just kind of move on from here, but these are some of the examples of the reason I was talking about them is why does an automotive OS need to be different? What is automotive about it, right? And this is the uniqueness that Tizen has targeted to make sure that an OS is OS is designed for a car platform. One other thing worth mentioning here, some of you might be familiar with an industry initiatives called GenEV. It's an initiative kind of trying to standardize on or build some solve problems that are automotive specific with some common open solutions. Tizen is a GenEV compliant OS. At the same time, there are initiatives like AGL, which have basically gone beyond IVI and targeted the whole automotive space. And they're targeting even things like instrumentation panels and so on and so forth. So the view is a little broader. AGL is for some of you who might be from telecom background, there was a time 15 years back when the presence of Linux in telecom was close to zero. And Linux later on became 70-80% penetration in telecom. And why that happened was through an initiative called Carrier Grade Linux, where we took Linux and targeted it for what's called carrier grade. Carrier grade means 5 nines reliability. You need to have 99.999% reliable infrastructure. Similarly, it's the same concept, automotive grade Linux. So automotive grade Linux is defining a set of specifications that an OS should cater to. And for automotive grade Linux, Tizen actually is the reference distribution for automotive grade Linux. So in a way, you can see in the Linux space in general, Tizen is playing the role of unification of multiple initiatives in the industry by offering a single open source operating system distribution that's GenEV compliant, that is the reference distribution for AGL, and that's actually addressing all the W3C standardization efforts for cars. So I would like to wrap up with a view of where we think the world is going. Now, this is not the only way of how car as a platform is going to evolve. This is one vector where we think this goes. And that vector is that, the path to autonomous driving seems to be the next big thing. And where you see where we are is in this box called in-vehicle infotainment, right? Where you are essentially, the infotainment functionality is being made available to you in the car. And the next phase is inform, where there will be some additional functionality built into the car, which will make the driver more informed. Right? And then the next phase would be assist, which would be where how do you actually assist the driver in making some decisions, and eventually going into what we call as this assume role, where the car assumes the responsibility of a driver, whether it's driving on a freeway, it's driving in the street, it's driving and finding the next parking lot. This is how we see the path to autonomous driving. Now, of course, along with that comes the increase in computing power that you would need, right, to make such a thing possible. And along with that comes the software innovation, and thus opportunity for the developers to leverage that curve that I'm showing in this slide on how do you keep your application ecosystem growing as the base platform evolves. I could talk more on this subject, but I was told 15 minutes. I think I've gone probably beyond that. So with that, Mario, is this time for panel or?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mahesh. And can I get like an internet safe version of this? I could probably put it on SlideShare and send a follow-up thank you. All right, I'd like to call up the panelists for tonight. And let's see here. Okay. All right. Well, one of them has a bomb, so hey, we're not in San Francisco. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I guess the music stopped and I got left without a seat. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably grab one of the chairs because we only have 2 mics. Grab one of these. Oh, thanks. So we all nice and cozy. Bunch of sweaty guys. Sitting. Let's see. All right. Okay, so I'll go down. We should just go down the line and with intros. I guess everyone knows who I am now. But yeah, we can start with. I'll go. Share this one.
Hi, I'm Mark Platshon, representing BMW's corporate venture group, iVentures. We do all kinds of special things like invest in this guy and help him get an i8. Right? So, you'll hear more about all that. I'll give you one quick story as an intro and a question. The BMW Venture Group doesn't work on cars, which is going to make sense in a second. We work on the ecosystem around the car. The M3 designers are pretty good at doing cars. They don't know anything about the ecosystem around the car. Charging networks. Being recorded, right? Oh my God. Parking, traffic, payments, charging networks, all the connected stuff is sort of outside of core R&D and part of what the venture group looks at. So let me ask you a question. How much money is wasted in the United States on car insurance every year?
All of it.
That's about $200 billion. If the vision that we represent here of autonomous cars happens, let's assume the accident rate, the injury rate drops by 90%. That giant wasted industry becomes really small business, along with collision repair and lots of other things that become a small business. And all that money gets freed up to pay for this kind of innovation and changing the way cities are organized and all that.
So it's a conspiracy.
The insurance people think it's going to reduce rates by 10%. They don't know that it's going to reduce rates by 90%. So I had a friend tell me he's decided with his new connected car stuff to not buy a replacement car. He's going to live in the city and not have his car. So what he's actually going to do is not only not replace the car, he's going to turn his garage into an Airbnb.
Cool. All right, Ankur.
Hey, so my name is Ankur Jain. I'm the CEO of HUMIN. It's a new company you're going to be launching in August, but some of you I've seen so far today already had it, so excited to get your feedback. But my role here, I think, is to talk about what connected cars actually mean from what you get to do with them. Because once you get the hardware and you get the connectivity, you're hopefully not spending your time browsing a Facebook newsfeed as you drive. So what does the future of a car application actually look like? And that's what I'll be referencing.
Hi, my name is Todd Green. I'm the CEO of PubNub. PubNub is a data stream network. We started the company about 4 or 5 years ago with this vision that applications were moving to the need for having a reliable way to sending and receiving data streams, right? So everything from social streams to connected house streams and connected car streams to voice over IP streams to you name it. And there was really no Akamai, for the lack of a better comparison, for data streams worldwide. So we started that. We launched it a few years back. We now have 150 million devices connected to this global network. It's about 2 to 3% of the entire IP space. And this represents devices across the spectrum, mobile, lots of different industries, mobile, desktop, browser, embedded devices. And what's been a big growth for us has been connected car. Right now, Sidecar, Lyft, Zoomy, Get Taxi, Easy Taxi, pretty much everyone except Uber, and we just haven't talked to them yet, use PubNub, as well as a number of connected car platforms, ones that are either providing app stores or trying to provide app stores inside cars, as well as ones sending telematics data back. And there are certain aspects of this network, but basically we try to make it really, really easy to write code that just gets your car on the network, and then really reliable ways to provide that communication deliverability of the messages bidirectionally. And so that's become a pretty fast-growing model for us. And so as we've discovered that connected cars is a big vertical for us, we're making a lot more presence in places like this, and that's why I'm here.
Great. Well, my name is Hakan. I'm with Panasonic Silicon Valley Center, and I'm within the automotive domain. And we love people like Mark that look beyond the car, what the car really touches. Panasonic has in-flight entertainment systems such as Panasonic Avionics and audio, video, lots of them you know. But 80% of our business is B2B. So in this kind of connected, contextual lifestyle, what it means, how education, the car, mobility, all that is impacted, that's the responsibility of the Silicon Valley Center within Panasonic. And I'll pass it to...
Thanks, Hakan. Hi, my name is Rahul Misra. I work for HARMAN. HARMAN is like Panasonic. We are a tier 1 supplier of automotive equipment, also obviously consumer electronics, audio gear, a whole nut range of products that HARMAN offers. We also, what my role is I run the AHA Cloud platform, which is HARMAN's way of moving beyond and not just offering hardware, but offering a solution for connectivity and services in the vehicle. And we offer that to any tier 1, any OEM. And I've been in the connected car space for the last, probably 14 years. I'm based out of Detroit.
Mahesh, Bhan with Intel out of Portland, Oregon. So, you have a car OEM, you have application developers, you have 2 tier 1s. So my job is really to supply to all of them. So I'm here to learn what they need.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get started. Hold your questions for later in the session tonight. We're trying to get through a handful of questions here first, but I really want to center the conversation around. I'll open up with developer ecosystem and getting access because there's a good developer audience here, and then we'll talk about the two 800-pound gorillas in the industry, and then we'll kind of center some of the legal stuff as well, and then we can and then dive onto some. Probably we'll take off a tangent, and I'll probably have to pull you guys back in, but more on the developer stuff. One is how are developers getting access to be in the car? Because is this going to be free access, or is it going to be like Ford right now has a program where it's invite only, you have to apply, all this red tape, blah blah blah, and it's really curated as opposed to open market. So I'd like to get some of your thoughts from the panel and see what are you guys experiencing.
So we do have a lot of people building platforms on PubNub for, now we're talking about connected car. This truly is connected, meaning a lot of the apps people are building inside the car in PubNub are ones that are sending information back or forth, right? Tracking your significant other in the car, getting diagnostics information to your mechanic, and every single one of these app stores I've talked to are definitely curated. We've partnered with Ford on a few things. We actually have one of they call them TDKs in our office. But every single one of them, there's a level of how much curation, whether it's very, very narrow focus or whether they sort of go do a once every week review. But it basically revolves around the security model, I think. So putting aside the security model of inside the car so that an app doesn't mistakenly trigger the brakes and the steering to turn left, there is this question around, as soon as your car starts streaming information, I mean, what's the two things it really has that you care about, right? One is telematics information. Well, how's the car performing, right? And the second is where you are. If you just narrow it down, there's probably a few others, but those are really the two key things. Where I am is you can do really killer apps with that, and also some kind of scary apps, right? Some things you don't necessarily want to share, especially when you start storing a history of that data. So there needs to be a really tight security model around that. And then same with the telematics side, right? There's the need to be able to prevent that information from getting into hands you don't want, but also providing a model where someone can say have access for a few minutes or an hour or something like that. So I think that when it comes to truly connected apps, we're seeing curation is the name of the game, A, and B, strong security models that the consumer can theoretically control. And there's been a disconnect I've seen so far with the ability to make it easy for the consumer to control those things, and the infrastructures like a PubNub that allow that, but providing the consumer-facing UI to make it easy for a consumer to realize, okay, my wife can see where I'm going, my mechanic can see what my car's doing, but my girlfriend, I don't want her to see, or vice versa. So you get the idea.
Well, that was a good example. I just wanted to say, first of all, there's no standard between all the OEMs. Everybody's a little different. And Mark can speak to this more probably in this panel more than any of us. But the point I wanted to make is, car, first of all, is not a device. It's a personal space. And it has a location. So now you have a space. It's personal. There's a location specifically for US. There's a lot of contextual information and application that could get into the transactions. So the discovery in the car is very powerful, but so far, unfortunately, none of us figured out to bring appealing application into a vehicle that you can say, this is it. So that's lacking, and part of that is the developers today are working on little things, but I think more so industry at our level, we have to bring some of the collaboration, and those things in the vehicle, it's not that complicated. So, I mean, let's say HARMAN and Panasonic. I would say us working together or bringing HARMAN, there's some sort of maybe collaboration needed, and it happens more in Japan than in US and Europe. So unfortunately, I would say the way the verticals are within OEMs in US is much deeper than in Japan. So I hope one day we can come much closer to work together.
All right, so I'll give you guys a real story of how broken this whole system is right now. Sorry, Mark. So to give you guys some background, you guys are going to be the first people who we're talking to about what we're actually not announcing this till October, but we'll give you guys a little background on what we're going to be announcing in October for connected cars, right? So HUMIN, just to give people background, is the first company that's actually tried to understand the context of all of your relationships, all the contacts you have. So when you meet people here at MobileMonday and you forget their name, you can just open up your phone and search for the guy you met at MobileMonday or the person you met last week, right? And when you open your phone, if you land in New York, it knows the contacts you know in New York and it puts the relevant ones up in front of you so it's accessible, right? So the idea is contextual information when you need it around people. We look at the car as a new connected platform, but a very, very different space than mobile. In mobile, the game was, how do you build apps that users spend the most amount of time on? On a car, the more time you spend on an app, the bigger a failure you are. And that's a huge shift, right? So the idea here is, how do you figure out what information is relevant to the device? Because one of the problems people made on mobile was, let's just take my desktop website and format it to a screen size that's 3 inches, right? Those guys all lost because mobile has a fundamentally different context for what you use it for. Car is the same thing. You don't go to your car to look at your news feed on Facebook, right? You go to your car because you're getting from place to place, and that process is going to open up a whole bunch of interesting opportunities beyond just internet radio and navigation, right? I mean, that's the problem. Is everybody's thinking about how do you build the next internet radio. I mean, what is you like? I mean, you guys will laugh, but like one of the car companies we work with, I won't name them, the killer app they're launching with at the end of the year is Priceline. So you can book a hotel or a car from your car. So you rent your car, you go to your infotainment system, and you say, I'd like to book a car. Shit, Hertz was $30 cheaper than the one I'm in right now, right? This is where we're at as a market. So what we're going to be announcing in October is the first social contextual layer to this. So now when you get in your car, what people are relevant? I don't want to scroll through a list of every person I've ever met in my life, but think of it from the way you think. The person I'm meeting next. That's probably a relevant query to put that person in front of you. So when you get in your car, their name, picture, and address is already loaded, and I just tap go. Maybe I don't have their address. I should just tap request. They get a text, and they hit share, and their current location is now stored in my GPS. Right? As I drive through San Francisco or Palo Alto, I don't want to see every contact I've ever seen. In fact, I don't even want to see everyone I know in San Francisco. But it's Thursday night in San Francisco, so who are the people that are relevant to me right now? I want their pictures there, I want their faces there, and I want to be able to call or navigate. Just like on my phone, I call or message. In a car, it's mobility, right? So you think about the opportunities around context, and it's a pretty exciting place to be made. The problem is, even an application as simple, complex technology in the back end, but that's irrelevant to the user experience, right? A simple user experience like that is next to impossible for us to roll out across the car market right now. You've got HARMAN controlling some of the infotainment. You've got Panasonic controlling some of the infotainment. You have BMW that then puts rules that says, if you wait 6 months, and by the way, BMW is an investor in us, so we love them, but if you wait 6 months, then maybe you'll be able to plug in your phone and have it run a second screen that's been designed by BMW, not even by us, to then show 2 or 3 things. And by the way, it doesn't work in the background if you switch between applications. So you can't even go to the navigation and continue running anything in the background. So, it's great that we're talking about Google and CarPlay in a second, but people have to remember, those aren't operating systems yet. Those are just apps on top of everything else, right? So there's no standard, and there's not a standard, frankly, for the foreseeable future, because the roadmaps in these cars are 3-4 years out, as you guys know, right? Supply for that. So you're not going to get a standard for a couple of years, which is kind of like back in the Qualcomm Java Brew days of cell phones. You're going to have these mostly crappy apps, like someone was joking earlier, like your fart app, right? It's coming out of these cars until we actually can get an easier distribution plane, easier standard. But we're not there yet. So.
Yeah, let me try to add something to that. So I think the answer so far, at least from a couple of you, has been that the app ecosystem for cars is more of a curated ecosystem, and I agree with that answer. But I would like to add another reason or another dimension to it where it's different from a mobile app ecosystem. In mobile today, basically apps are distributed through a couple of app stores, right? And there isn't a concept of liability. In cars, all liability is of car OEM, the recalls and stuff. So if you have an app in your car that can cause a crash, the consequences of that are potentially human lives. And where does that liability reside? And today, everybody in the car industry, we all as consumers are used to the notion of car OEM being responsible for anything wrong happening in the car. So as a result, that's the reason why car OEMs would want to control that, right? Of course, there's the business reason, monetization reasons, because once you control it, you control the consumer, right? And that's really the battle, and I think we're going to get there next in our discussion. But there's also the reason who has the liability of a malicious app.
I don't know how that's any different than a phone. I mean, I'm sitting on my phone in my car. If I get into an accident because I'm looking at Instagram.
Microphone, please. We can't hear
Yeah,
you.
but it's not the car that caused your accident, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I disagree. I think most of the sensors in a car are locked off anyways from being controlled by third-party apps. And so, if anything, it's the distraction of the app, which is no different than the distraction of my being on my cell phone.
But a distraction of an app is nobody's liability. Distribution due to a app. A malicious app on a car is somebody's liability.
Anyways, my gut instinct says if we don't start opening this up a little bit, those problems prevent innovation from anything ever happening, right? And so the mindset of saying, at least let's start opening things up with some standard, and you can put restrictions and you can put barriers, but right now it's so blocked off that even like a basic app to read your email messages out loud to you, even if you don't even see them, can't get pushed through to consumers, period. So before we're worrying about whether apps are safe, we don't even have a system to get apps on a car, right? So there's no infrastructure, I don't know who to talk to outside of the people we work with, right? I don't know who to go to even say, is my app safe, right? And so somebody's got to own that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I can add here, but I agree with Mahesh. I mean, there's a safety issue, right? I mean, you can say, hey, you open it up, let people do what they want, but at the end of the day, when that person crashes their car, and they're going to sue the OEM, and so that's why they're very cautious about it. I agree with a lot of people on the panel. It is a problem, though, and unfortunately, if the OEMs don't fix this problem around the app ecosystem, somebody is going to solve it for them, and that's why. My segue for our panel moderator here is that this is the fear of Apple and Google, and Apple and Google are coming in with their solutions because there has not been. OEMs are egocentric, right? They make these great app stores, and there's one luxury German OEM who I won't name. They have a great solution where you can walk into that car and your car seat position and everything is saved for you, but only when you're in that car. I mean, how many people are going to give their kids a luxury OEM? Maybe people in the valley here. You guys are all super wealthy. But point being is, it's very egocentric. It's closed off, and Apple and Google are coming in, and they are, offering a very compelling solution that users are interested in adopting. And at HARMAN, we are definitely looking at that. But there's a cautious note, right? I mean, if you look at the cell phone industry. Everybody used to worry about, oh, you've got the latest Verizon phone, the latest AT&T phone, and nowadays you don't care about that. You care about your iPhone. You tout your iPhone. You tout your Android phone. You're not touting the carrier. So I think definitely for the OEMs, they worry about losing the brand identity to these large players.
But one thing I wanted to add to Rahul is Harman and Panasonic is coming from the consumer side, in a sense that we're a little bit unique. If you talk to people like Denso and Bosch, they're much more harsher, and so on and so forth. But I think maybe we'll pass it to Mark and let's see what he's going to say. Mark?
Man, being the only OEM here is ugly. Boy, I am really bad at making excuses. But when you think about not just a car, but a whole line or brand of cars, to take what ought to be a simple app and say, now I want it to work on the 7 Series with heads-up display, with voice control, with touch control, with gesture control, with a million different user interface alternatives that unfortunately, or maybe appropriately, are different. The 7 Series is designed for certain kinds of people. The millennials buy a 1 Series, a 2 Series, a 3 Series, which has a different user interface. So now, how many engineers should we have making Pandora work seamlessly on 8 different configurations of head units? Just for a company that makes 2% of the cars in the world. And if we're going to do that, as soon as we finish making Pandora supported for all the cars, you guys switch to Spotify.
Good stories, guys. So we've taken a look at getting inside the OEM and getting in the platform, and there's probably, like you said, there's liability, and it probably will be up to whoever owns that platform allowing access. I think that's where curation's going to end up. So far, no whoopee cushion app, I think, for now, in the car.
We can get an app in the car in about 6 months. Now, why it takes more than a day and a half, I don't know.
I got a question for you guys. Why haven't you switched over to Google Play or Google, whatever it is, Android Wear, or the iOS system, CarPlay? Is it because the OEMs don't want you to do it? Is it because you guys have your own stuff built into it? Like, what is the reason that the infotainment systems haven't done that?
Well, first of all, OAA, which is Open Automotive Alliance, will have Android OS in the vehicle, so that's happening. There's an alliance announced. No, as a core OS. Okay. So it was just announced at the Google I/O 4 weeks ago, and I think Harman was there, Panasonic was there, and so on and so forth. So that's coming. But I think from our side, maybe a short answer. Rahul, you want to add more?
All right. Thanks, Hakan. No, absolutely. We really feel like we're the bridge between Silicon Valley and Detroit, right? So bringing all these great ideas into the car. So yeah, we have embraced the things that Apple and Google are doing. In fact, a lot of the announcements, those are actually Harman head units. So, we absolutely embrace it. Now, why haven't we done it in the past, right? I mean, you're very OEM focused, right? OEMs have a brand identity. I mentioned this beforehand. I mean, what's in a BMW is different than a Mercedes, is different from a GM, is different from a Toyota, and they don't want to lose that brand identity. And so I think that is, a core reason why they look at it and they will embrace it because customers want it, but they also, keep a cautious eye on it. So,
one thing go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I probably have no business talking during this question because I'm not an OEM, but I mean, this harkens back to, I remember sitting on panels in the telecom days before the iPhone, and it was the same argument, right? It's the walled garden and everything else. But what's different here, right? I remember in the 80s, we all just put new car stereos in because that was the only thing, right? And they were all the same single or double DIN unit. Now, like you were saying, it's the heads-up display. The entire experience is integrated, and it's part of the brand experience, right? I mean, I owned an X5, and it's an amazing brand experience. You go to a different car, it's really a completely different thing. And I don't see realistically, that's going to change anytime soon. Or there's going to be a single standard that everyone's going to subscribe to across all these different OEM, all the car manufacturers. So when I look at the interesting stuff that people are doing with our technology, it more is along the lines of, it was interesting actually. One company started with embedded Android units, and then they just buy a phone and just have it on a mount. Or the smarter guys are now taking the OBD2 port, plugging in a little device with a Bluetooth to some little Android device you can Velcro onto your dashboard, right? And as cheesy as that looks from an experiential perspective, especially when you just spent 80 grand in a nice Beamer with this incredible UI, that's the only thing I see happening over the next 5 years. That's really where it's going to be for any of the connected car apps, unless there's either that's as much as I see actually happening.
So I still don't understand. So when you guys are launching this new Open Alliance platform with Google, are you still going to keep all the Ford branding and the way they want to do it, or the GM branding and their app ecosystem on top of that? I mean, how are you guys going to actually play that out?
Well, we're not launching, per se as HARMAN and Panasonic. Google announced it, just like OHA, Open Handset Alliance, there's Open Automotive Alliance, and you can see what's going to happen. But from our point of view, as Rahul said, car makers make a lot of decisions. So at the end of the day, Tier 1 is there, there's a request for quotation, whatever that is, they drive the business. We bring in solutions, and I think I would say HARMAN and Panasonic are unique because I would say much more innovative than others around the consumer space or blending the two. The problem is, and I hope today we'll talk about this, it's not the app, it's the business case. There's not any app today in the vehicle that justifies the business case. Now, contextual discovery, absolutely. How you would do it, I would love to see it. But at the end of the day, the simple answer is the car is a location-specific personal space. The airport and car has a special relationship versus city, versus the Disneyland, versus the drive-through. The drive-through alone is US $94 billion. So why can't we automate that? And Panasonic has POS systems. We've been telling OEMs, look, here's a Panasonic POS system, here's a overall Panasonic in-car system. How do we tie it together? Now, finally they see it, but it takes time. But at the end of the day, car is a place to discover information, and then you need to tie that into transactions. That's where the business model is.
Okay, so let's move on to this other question. Okay, so regardless of the platform, right? There will be cars with ties in, right? We have Jaguars, we have those agreements that are out there already. We have other folks that are going to be Android, or they're gonna go multiple different directions, right? And I think because my personal vision is there's a large display in the car, and that's what it is, a display. And I bring this with me, and then this becomes the computing power, and it's future-proofed, and it's freaking awesome, right? How many people still have their old 19-inch displays, right, that hook up to their laptop at home? Probably many of you do. And I kind of see that kind of evolving. That is basically the future, right? But so now we have that. I'll paint that future. All right, there's a display in the car. I have my device. I plug it in, and regardless of whatever operating system it is now, I'm curious to see what are we going to get access to in the car, right? I'm going to open that up and see let's do some blue sky brainstorming and see what does that future look like. Do I get access to the massaging seats? Do I get heated seats? Do I what as a developer? And I think people are curious because once we get access to whatever, we'll come up with interesting ideas. So I'd like to open up to the panel and see what do you guys like? This is blue sky. What would we see in 10 years from now that we get access to from the development perspective?
Wow, interesting. This kind of question has to be broken down into use cases, and I would argue, we have whole groups thinking about the commute situation, thinking about the local delivery, the pick up the kids situation, the trip and travel situation. There's all kinds of different of these applications, but the car is a hub for family connection, for car to grid connection. Electric cars have to know where the charging is and how to charge and when to charge and how far you can go to charge and all that stuff. So we divide this stuff down, and regard each of those as important. And some, we had one company that was in multimodal routing, so that often the car is not the right solution for certain kinds of travel. And those of us who make cars are starting to think a lot about mobility services in addition to the car. Maybe although we want to make cars, we also want to make services like Uber or Drive Now or Park Now or Charge Now or whatever. Mercedes has Car to Go. You're seeing automakers think about multimodal use cases. If my ticket can pay for parking, it can pay for tolls, why can't it get me in and out of the airport and take care of trains and planes and buses and rail and everything else? So I think the challenge and the opportunity for the tier ones, some of this we develop ourselves, but mostly we rely on tier ones to come to us. Now, the problem is when we have 22 different tier ones in the same car, trying to do over-the-air updating so it all still works, one of them isn't broken, that's a challenge again.
What percent of cars in 10 years on the road will be autonomous?
In 10 years?
Yeah.
Of new sales, 20%. Cars on the road will be 1 or 2%. But
10 years.
But of cars that are selling in 10 years, 20%.
Wow.
Maybe more.
Why so low?
Car life is
They
long.
last a long time.
I know.
New cars.
No, he said 20%.
They don't
new
crash.
cars.
So you don't-
Why only 20% of new cars?
Expense.
Hey, we got to guess.
I like Ankur and his and its eagerness. But what typically happens, someone asked me the question the other day about wearables, and it was somebody at a bit large OEM, and it says, Marty, what's your opinion? When are wearables going to hit? And I was like 5 to 10 years, and they're like, what? People have projections of high numbers for wearables and probably high numbers for connected cars or autonomous cars. But the reality is, when I started in this industry 15 years ago, this was the vision we were pitching. And many of you have been here for that long, that when we pitched 3G connections, this was the vision. Ankur, this is your father's vision as well. We all had this 15 years ago, and I was working in Seattle at the small startup and then at AT&T. But it didn't become a reality until 8 years, almost 10 years later. To be honest with you, GPS. I was working on solutions how to triangulate cell IDs because GPS wasn't efficient enough. We didn't have sensitive GPS devices, etc. Things take a lot of time for adoption, and I think connected cars are going to be riddled with. The autonomous cars are going to be riddled with a lot of issues. I think you can do it You could do this in Madagascar. You could do this in Japan. You could do this in the Vatican City, probably. It takes small places to put the infrastructure in and things like that. But for the U.S., we're large like the Titanic. The people. The deal is, once you get the Oklahoma Walmart shopper engaged, and is using HUMIN, then you've made it. But until then, the flyover states, they're not going to get it, and it's going to take them, it takes them a long time, right?
This is why we partner with Tupperware. Seriously.
So I was only going to add a couple things. Number one is, encouraged by this whole idea of it being much more of a seamless, not an app-based ecosystem, but more of a seamless car experience. I like what I'm hearing here because, that's really the way I see the future. It's not app-based. It's not bring this great app in. It's just you get in the car, and if that car can tell you to go on the 101 instead of 880 because there's an accident. If it's just seamless, it's very easy to use. Because the problem with today's infotainment systems is that, and I see these ones from, OEMs where it's like 2 minutes to get a weather map, right? People just don't have the patience for that. And so, I think that seamlessness is very important. The autonomous driving thing, definitely, I think it's coming. I came out to LA a number of years ago. I used to be a planner at Audi, and we tested adaptive cruise control. And unfortunately it meant that I sat in traffic for the entire day. They didn't tell me that when they told me to come out. But it would just pull you through the traffic, and I said, wow, this is a future where we'll have autonomous driving. But just to put some things in perspective, right? A radio right now, Panasonic, I'm sure, would agree with these numbers, but I mean, we're looking at 6 to 10 million lines of code, and we still find tremendous amounts of bugs. I mean, these are like short-lived Android tablets, and I mean, we have tools now where we can real-time go in and debug this stuff, but you can only imagine the autonomous driving. I mean, how much time it's going to take to debug these systems. It's incredible.
We've only been talking about, maybe this is the point of the panel, but it's connected cars from a single dimension, which is the consumer dimension. But if you look at least we're seeing the growth on our side, it's almost all commercial, right? It's delivery, it's trucking, it's there's all of these applications. There are embedded devices mounted on containers to track to see where the containers are, and sensors to see things like impact and elevation, altitude, things like that. So I always feel like the consumer stuff is the last stuff to get the adoption, right? But where it's easy is going to be is all these commercial things. It's not so much tracking where I am, but I want to track where my pizza is, right? So there's a lot. There's a whole. We don't have time for it, but there's a whole commercial dimension to this, which I think is going to have a much faster adoption curve than any of the stuff that we're talking about so far.
So I'd like to add maybe another dimension to the question you asked, and I thought the question you asked was, is what is inside the car going to become a remote display, and if it does, what kind of apps do you see there? And I would like to say it doesn't matter actually in the long run, because it's really the threat of Apple and Google we're talking here, right? What essentially Apple and Google are trying to do is they're trying to bring either an iOS device or an Android device into a connected car, and rightfully so. Most of us either have Android phones or iOS phones, so that's exactly a use case everybody needs, right? But then, do you start the Pandora app from your phone or actually from your, IVI unit? Doesn't matter. But then look forward, and we talked about where the car as a platform is going, right? The moment you start thinking about things like instrumentation panel as the next, platform where the innovation is going to happen, I have actually seen studies like if you put together, infotainment unit, instrumentation cluster, maybe virtualize them, the number of megapixels that needs to be rendered in a car is about 20 times as much of a high-def TV of today, right? That's not going to happen on the phone, right? So, yeah, maybe the phone comes in, there's a use case for that, but the evolution of car as a platform would continue. And these numbers, by the way, I wasn't even talking about autonomous driving yet. If you actually compute for that, then it's a lot higher than that. So, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you start Pandora from phone or there, but I don't think this industry should be threatened by the fact that the innovation on the car as a consumer electronics platform by itself would stop. That will not stop.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to add is it's public knowledge. Panasonic is invested in Tesla, but nobody can deny Tesla did a lot of things in automotive OEM's world that shifted lots of thinking. The point that I want to make is earlier what Mark said also, there's BMW 1 Series and 4 Series, 5 Series, 7 Series, they're all different. Now, you can think of in the future, 3 years, back to your question, you could have a new car company that focusing on electric vehicle only, such as Tesla, but it's more urban vehicle. So those are the people who will completely change this whole domain. So we'll see more verticals as far as back to your question. It's not personal vehicle, it's not the consumer, but it's more vertical. And those will be much more available to either verticals or it'll be open to, let's say, the college campus. We see those as really shifting the whole domain. And then the OEMs, other OEMs will follow. That'll be the shifting, but it will not happen in 3 to 4 years. Maybe it'll be 5 to 6 years. It's going to take some time. And in the car company, a lot of you know, the combustion engine was the king. These guys would spend so much money on the powertrain control modules and so on and so forth. It used to be that 20 years ago, electronics, radio was the radio. Now, a lot of the commercials you watch, it's all about infotainment, lifestyle, and so on and so forth. It's shifting, but still for the traditional legacy OEMs, they haven't seen the value. For me, car is all about lifestyle. Now, back to you. I know you're so eager. You want to talk, which is wonderful. But when you come to this world, the car side, the volume is so small. That's number one. So you have to really focus where you want to go. And for you, 3 years from now, we'll all be here, hopefully, the same people, Mario. I would like to see how successful where you are. That's what I'm dying to see. I mean, because that's what we need to get people like him excited. In 2 years, do a check.
I don't know. When I hear all this, my biggest worry for the car space is that I don't think the connected car as a successful platform is a given. And all of this assumes that the connected car the next big platform is a given for the market. And if there's no quick standard and these guys don't get it together, then all these solutions and use cases you're talking about can be solved with a wearable, right? And at some point it becomes just like it is today, where connected car fell so far behind that I just use my cell phone for GPS instead of my car, right? 10 years ago that would have been unheard of, and people would have said the navigation is the next big GPS infotainment system in the car, and now nobody even uses it. I mean, the last time I used my car nav, did they? Oh, there you go. Like the last time I used my car nav, I can't even remember, right? So like the more we keep getting into these arguments, and this is why I was pushing earlier on what you were saying with like the safety issue, is we can have these conversations forever, right? And I don't know if they'll ever get anywhere, and at that point it doesn't matter anymore in 5 years. If in 10 years only 20% of the cars are like autonomous, that's like saying that only 20% of the phones sold today are smartphones, the rest are feature phones, right? At some point, like...
Yeah, but cars last longer than phones. People get them every 2 years. Cars, it takes a long time.
But you're correct.
But I guess my point is that like all these use cases that we're talking about, and by the way, like the idea of I walk into a McDonald's drive-thru and it's pinging me and I can just order and pay, that's awesome, right? But if my car doesn't do that, then my watch does, and I don't care.
Yeah, it's going to happen on your phone, not your car.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But to your point, 25 to 30% of the phones today are smartphones, not mobile.
It depends which markets.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just say, I mean, I think that if you go where Mario was going with the future, I mean, I think the future, and we see it already today, is that people don't want to own cars. They want the best consumer device. And I think that's really the danger to the car industry, which I think Ankur's getting at, is that, and if you think about it, the Ubers of the world, I mean, that's really where I see people just renting cars and cars being able to, and I think they even said that we are looking at the world where Uber's delivering autonomous cars to people's houses, right? And I don't think they understand the danger of autonomous cars, right? That means that your in-laws, who are 4 hours away and would never drive, they could just hop in a car and they'd be there. There's a scary notion there.
Can I just make one quick plea to developers and product managers out there not to create connected car apps for connected car's sake? I just put this aftermarket. Is there anyone here from JVC? Okay, good. So an aftermarket JVC in one of my cars, and it says Pandora. It's branded Pandora. So now when I turn it on, I have Bluetooth connected to my nice big Android phone. It launches the Pandora app on my Bluetooth phone and my nice Android, and then it flips the screen and says JVC Smart Control. So I can't use Pandora from my phone anymore. And now I have to use this terrible interface on the JVC to control my phone, which had a beautiful interface, which is harder to reach and harder to see what the music is. So anyway, the point is that connected car for connected car's sake is not a solution.
So we could just all get like iPad minis and Velcro it to our dashboard for the stopgap solution. I love it. All right.
Well, Mario, can I say one thing? We did a focus group 2 years ago, and sometimes we do focus groups. We don't tell people who we are. We did 3 cities. Long story short, they didn't know who we were. We had these ideas, concept. They thought we were Apple. So they were like, when is this car coming out? You got to tell us. We have iPhones. I mean, it was so interesting how people are so hungry, somebody like Apple, to do something that they can relate to. It's very interesting.
Oh, Apple fanboys. Right. All right. But I guess let's look at some of the, let's talk about what are some of the barriers right now that will put a connected car at risk, like that can put some speed bumps and halt it, and there's a lot of acceleration happening with the app and mobile device ecosystem. You're right. The car is not moving so fast. We don't change cars often. Maybe we lease, and every 4 years we do that. What are some of the barriers right now that could really push this back to the 10 years of, we're stuck for another 10 years of just mediocrity?
Yeah, I'll say 2 things, and then I'll leave up the panel to add more. One of them is definitely there's NHTSA things going on with the government, something we have to keep an eye. And California is also very sensitive what kind of things you can use. And on 101, there was a story 2 months ago. Somebody was basically suppressing all the phone signals around the vehicle. So yeah, there's some people also, they don't want people to talk on the phone. So as they drive, they have these suppressors. They're kind of military grade and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things going on that side. NHTSA, safety, the government, and so on and so forth. The second piece is, I also want to say that upgradability. I mean, you cannot have a connected car that either over the air or the modules, somehow we have a lot of proposals on the table. Sometimes I think OEMs need to grasp, because that also gives them more volume. Today, you have maybe 15 million vehicles, let's say, in a good year in the US. Now, if you have upgradability, that volume will go up every year. So every 2 years you can upgrade, so it gives us more volume. But Rahul, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to what Hakan was saying, but one of them is security, right? Obviously, I think what would hold us back is somebody, and in fact, there was a company that presented at a conference in Detroit, and the guy had reverse engineered Tesla, and it was able to unlock the doors, right? So the first person that actually is able to crash a car and kill somebody, I think will be, that will set us back a long ways in terms of connectivity and fulfilling the dreams of the connected car because of those fears. And then the other one is privacy, obviously. I mean, that's a big thing. We've been dealing a lot with European privacy regulations, which are a lot more stringent than here. And, there's a lot of focus on what's being collected, what people are, surrendering in terms of their privacy. So those are two things I think will hold back the industry.
I was talking to the Google guys, since I guess they're not up on the panel here, to defend themselves. I'm a huge believer in the autonomous car, and frankly, it works really well right now. And as Ankur said, we could be almost rolling it out now. Not quite. The kinds of corner cases that we were just laughing about, the Google guys said, so, we're driving up to this intersection, and it's very good at seeing when there's a pedestrian in the middle of an intersection or a crosswalk or a street, and it'll slow down and make sure to go around them. But it doesn't hit them. But it doesn't know that the pedestrian standing in the middle of the intersection is actually wearing a blue uniform with a black belt, and he's going like this. And it drives right through him, right around him. It doesn't hit him, but it goes through the intersection when the policeman is standing there saying, stop. So it's not good enough to just know there's a pedestrian on LiDAR. There's a light blob there. It has to actually know that's not a lady with a stroller, that's a cop. And this means stop. So there's just a million of these corner cases where it has to make decisions. If it sees a blowing paper bag in the road, and it has to decide, do I just run that over? I mean, you would decide instantly, I'm going to run that over. It can't tell that from a rock, which it should go around. So there's just a million of these that have to get sorted out. I'm the first one to say when it's ready, it'll be not a crime, but when you're buying a car for your 16-year-old daughter, you will buy an autonomous car as soon as they're ready. And grandpa, who falls asleep at every light and can't quite get to the golf course anymore, grandpa would pay $40,000 extra because we're going to take his keys away. If he can have a car that he thinks he's driving, but it's getting him to the golf course, perfect.
Yeah, maybe a couple of things. So the first thing is the design cycle itself. I think this is more of an observation. Cars today, they still take about 3 years to be designed. And phones or tablets today, from concept, now it's down to 6 months or less now. Yes. So by definition, by the time you think of a car and you think of a phone platform has evolved 6 times over by that time the car is out, right? So car industry has to learn how to go faster. Right? That's number one. Number two is, I think the reality of numbers, which is it's true that more and more people are gravitating towards the core of the cities. The growth rate of new car purchases is slowing down, right? So it's risky if car application ecosystem tries to grow by itself as a separate ecosystem. Now, there's also the other risk of, okay, you get attached to a mobile ecosystem, then you get what you get. You're not basically doing innovation for cars, you're doing innovations for mobile and applying it to the car. So that's why this concept of maybe an IoT ecosystem where car and TV and wearables, where the numbers by itself grows as an ecosystem, right? And maybe that's something the industry should drive towards, so that we can actually design in cars what we want or what the car should have, and not get kind of this, okay, whatever was left over in mobile comes into the car.
Let's open up to questions from the audience and seeing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, with you, brown jacket.
So
And speak loud. Speak loud.
This is to all of you guys. So I'm seeing the whole liability aspect of danger with car and giving access, right? On the other side, Ankur wants to innovate faster, do more things. You mentioned that you have a airplane infotainment system, right? Why not the automotive guys create a sandbox which is disconnected completely from the core heavy aspects of the car, right? Forget about autonomous driving. I know it's technically possible, right? Forget about all that. Give something that can make the driver's experience more convenient. If I want to, as he said, look up some friends in New York, or if I want to, whatever, right? Things that are augmenting my experience in that personal space. You need not give me access to, the core features of the car. Let that be controlled by the automotive guys. But the automotive guys need to let guys like Ankur play in the sandbox and do what's convenient for the user experience, and not kind of try to innovate with the JVC app that doesn't work like hell, right? So that's what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a very good question. Don't get me wrong. We all want to go fast. We all want to support. We want to see this industry shift. In 2004, when I joined Panasonic first, we had a concept that had a display, 7-inch, kind of like this, and it was on the car. You could take out with you, and it had a keyboard that you could kind of type in. At the time, they said it makes no sense. There's no keyboard. And after whatever years, iPad comes in, everybody loves it. So the car makers could have done detachable displays back in 2004, 2005. We had it on the table. And Panasonic supplies a lot of components to iPhone and Google and Android tablets and so on and so forth. Long story short, companies like HARMAN and Panasonic could bring a lot of innovation, but at the end of the day, there's an OEM that makes this decision. Now, if you go to somebody like Tesla, it's a little bit different. They're newcomers that are shifting too. But at the end of the day, the car is a starting point for a lifestyle, specifically for US. Now, Asia and Europe, much more mobile phone centric. But in US, you buy a car, and 22% of those cars that you buy today have a brand value, such as Mini or the Prius or BMW, Audi, and so on and so forth. Now, for those, it's very easy to do what you want to do. Really create a business model, tie into airport, make it much more contextual. If you drive a BMW, you park in a special place at the airport. And then you get into lounge with your BMW key. So all these things are possible. Everything is on the table from Panasonic point of view because we have all these domains. Now the question is, from the car maker point of view, they want to be part of this revenue stream, which we pull that into, but some other players are not there yet. They will be there in 1 or 2 years. But still, there's this business model, which we didn't talk about it today, but that's still a holdback for some people. And I think in a company like BMW, and I think Mark is unique on iVentures, still in such as advanced as BMW, there's nobody owns the connectivity business. They have the connectivity drive, but the goal is still to sell cars, not to create this mobility. There's a revenue, it's additional P&L for them. So that's what I think needs to be done. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say, we've done that. At HARMAN, we've offered frameworks. Panasonic's offered frameworks, right? 5 years ago it was like Java, right? And then a couple years later it's Android, right? There's a problem of obsolescence too as well. We've offered these things before. And it fundamentally comes down to this, and I know they were criticizing a Pandora interface, but I've seen some that are awesome. And if you actually look at how many people actually use those, it's like less than 5%. I can offer all that, and I think all of you would take advantage of it, right? Because we're all kind of nerdy, geeky guys and gals, right? But frankly speaking, most consumers just don't appreciate it. So So that's where I come back to what Ankur's doing and what a colleague from PubNub is doing as well. It's just some type of way to make it seamless, make it part of your life. And Mahesh also talked about that. That to me is a much more interesting value prop, and where we need to have that focus. So.
All right, another question. Let's go up here in the front in the blue shirt.
Yeah, I'm interested in commentary. I want to make an argument on why I think Mario's right about it. This is really going to be an app that runs on the phone. Take your case about HUMIN to start. The last thing I want to do as I go into my meeting is I want to turn off the car, and I want to be able to see exactly what I saw on the dash on my phone. So that says that app belongs on the phone, not baked in the infotainment system.
Doesn't matter which it runs on.
You're right, but are you going to do some sort of stateless handoff to an app on the phone?
It's always in sync.
So the second point is exactly what you guys are talking about obsolescence today. Moore's law is what, 50 to 100x over 10 years. That's sort of, before we're going to be complaining in 10 years about the stuff I bought in the car because it ran HUMIN on the dash, and so that's another reason why you want the display. Comment?
No, I mean, it shouldn't matter where it runs, right? I mean, most of these services should be seamless across devices. As long as you're connected, it doesn't take. When you open your phone, the context of whatever was on the device should be there.
Yes, but in 10 years, your app is going to be way too powerful to run on the car.
So it'll be, the car, so I'll give you a good
The
example.
car I buy today,
Yeah, so,
5 years old.
right, so this is an interesting difference, right? It's not necessarily about the car. Some of it can be moved to the cloud, some of it can be done on the car. So you can move processing wherever, right? So
the
that's
web tier.
Yeah, but the idea is that the processing itself is no longer the limitation. Like with HUMIN on the mobile phone, for example, we're one of the first companies that moved all the processing to the device away from the cloud, right? Because these phones are so powerful. We actually said your data doesn't need to go to our servers. That solves the security and the privacy and some of the scalability issues. Let's just process it on the device and then just connect the relevant data to the cloud. On a car, we could do the opposite for relevant information, right? So hopefully these guys by then will have figured out how to rapidly produce cars, or at least upgrade the hardware, right? I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to do a quick swap. I mean, I'm not the guy building it, but I imagine.
I mean, when you think about it, also we talked about this HTML5 and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of things moving into apps to the cloud, but when and how, we'll wait and see. I think some OEMs are almost there. Some are lagging. I think we're going to get there. I'm optimistic. So I think 2017 timeframe will be the turning point. And at that time, I think we're not going to have these computing problems and all these things that we really talk about today. Until maybe 2 years ago, still now, maybe last year, the car makers wanted to have a solution that uses 100% of the memory. It's just right on so you're 5 cents cheaper. Not to blame them, that's their reality. So in a sense that we were playing that game, but it's shifting. Anybody?
I mean, just one real-world example. One of the car makers that we're working with, that we're launching with in January, they currently have, it's not about the future, right? Like today, the total space that we have to play with on the car system is 5 megabytes. That's like 2 photos. It doesn't run any CSS. It doesn't run any dynamic animations. It's like a static HTML. You guys probably know which car company I'm talking about, but it's really bad. But we just for that specific use case, move the processing up to the cloud and only just load the base necessary information on the screen, right? Whereas on the phone, we're doing a ton of stuff. So I think it'll be, even for the legacy cars, I don't think it'll be as much of an issue. It's just like building backward compatibility for an iPhone 4 versus an iPhone 5S.
More questions? Okay, over here in the front.
Hi, my name is Liz Jensen. Who do you think will be paying for the connectivity into the car?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, great question. It's not the consumer, right? And that's been one thing we've advocated from our side, from the AHA Cloud platform, is just nobody's going to want to pay for content they get for free on their phone, right? In fact, you whip your phone out if you have to pay for traffic or weather. So I think that the OEMs and the service, you have to look at other alternative business models, right? And I think from an OE perspective, that's a challenge, because I think they look at it from oh wow, we can monetize, we can actually get annual service revenues, and that has failed miserably, unfortunately, for them. So
Just announce that.
yeah, I won't comment on that.
So this is interesting. Okay, so we didn't cover this. So do you think the future that all connected cars, am I gonna have to pay a subscription for the data? I mean, is it gonna be another bolt on to my AT&T Verizon plan? Is that where you guys see this? Or because immediately, the subscription rates for all those other companies kind of doubles overnight, right?
No, I mean, I think there's ways to do it in the back end. I mean, some of the things we've looked at from a big data perspective, right, is now that the car is a node on the network, right, I can pull off all this great data. And, fascinating enough, right, the OEMs have no idea how you use your car, right? So there's a lot of information that can be used to help improve that car. And I think they're really looking at it from that perspective. And that's why you look at like OnStar, they have like a free mobile app to unlock your doors, right? And you don't have to subscribe to OnStar. And part of the reason they do that is because, they have access then to the embedded modem, the data that's on that car. So that's, I think, the value. So I don't think, I think there's some that think they're going to make a lot of money that way, but I think the ones that are more realistic will, eventually get that it's not charging all of us for that. Nobody's going to use it.
Well, some of the car companies want to take and have the car generate a lot of data and then monetize that data by selling it to other services. So I'm not sure that the consumer will have to buy data service. He might be able to keep a portion of the data he sells.
Yeah, I think there are probably going to be multiple answers to that question. I'm aware of a case where, and this is not in the US, where the insurance company actually is paying for it. They are tracking the driver behavior, and based on that, changing their insurance rates for the drivers. How fast do they drive? Do they adhere to rules? So that's a use case. I don't think that would be a ubiquitous use case, but here is an example of where there are going to be alternate ways of for paying for connectivity.
No, that's happening in the US.
Maybe it's happening in the US, but the case I was aware of was in China actually. Yeah.
We made something to do that.
Well, I just wanted to say two things. Number one, today the connectivity is, in a way, infotainment systems, low, mid, high, and that's for everybody. So that will change. So you'll have a car specifically that has an app for real estate agents. Now, for a real estate agent, car app is money. So from their point of view, they will definitely pay for something like this. We have concepts, very interesting discussions. I think that's moving. Or medical doctor, so on and so forth. Panasonic does Tough Book for police cars. So in that sense, that's a vertical specific. There's a huge value in that. At the same time, a lot of you figured out now, it's all about indirect business models. You have this new generation also coming up. They don't want to pay for anything. I mean, our generation is, I don't like another monthly payment. $5, that's too much. $4, that's okay. This new generation, forget it. And they're talking, you ask them about privacy, they're like, if I get anything back, you can have my privacy. So in that sense, this whole business equation will shift, and Google knows this, and more so than I would say maybe others. So Google will definitely play this indirect, that's what they do today. So from the companies like HARMAN and Panasonic being on the CE side, our challenge is bringing all these entities together in a car domain with the car company and playing on the brand, because BMW brand has a lot of value. So that is easier to monetize BMW 7 Series or BMW 1 Series that I would say XYZ car. There are a lot of people not interested in XYZ car, but they're very interested in BMW owners as they're connected. So they will be easier for certain cars to be moving into indirect business model than others, XYZ cars. And maybe you don't have them.
So if I'm a Pinto or Pacer owner, there'll be no interest in me.
Sorry, Mario.
Okay, sorry, Pinto and Pacer owners. Let's go to the far back and get some questions out there. Okay, Oliver, come on and speak loud.
Okay, so from a consumer point of view, what is the problem with a dumb car? Mario's vision of you just share the content via AirPlay or Android from your smartphone. I don't see the answer.
Well, you said dumb car. At the Detroit Motor Show, we had a concept that said phone is the brain. Of course, we're showing to a car maker. We can't say, a dumb car. So we said phone is the brain. Now, some car makers say for certain cars, yeah, that's okay. But a lot of them, they want to own this relationship. So literally, I don't blame them. I mean, at the end of the day, Carlos Ghosn was here, the Nissan CEO, and he gave a talk at Stanford University almost a year ago. We had a lot of people. We had some Google people, I think. They asked the question, exactly what you said. Why not just open the screen? Let us do our magic. And not exact words, but he was very intelligent. He kind of alluded to Nokia, what happened to Nokia. And we don't have to go into this. But also he said, having a car like having a pet. You don't want to lose the identity of the pet. So from his point of view, the relationship of the car, whatever Pathfinder, Infinity, whatever that was, that relationship was a signature. He didn't want to give up that. And from their point of view, if you put yourself in their shoes for a minute, you can have sympathy.
So I mean, this is I'm not in the automotive space per se, so here's a novel idea. But, the iPhone was the quote-unquote, I hate using the word disruptive, by almost the stereotypical disruptive influence in the mobile industry, right? And it's hard to imagine what the automotive equivalent would be. If you go back to the 1920s, a lot of these cars were bespoke cars, right? So, handmade custom bodies, they'd buy engines, brakes and everything else. And we're moving to this model now, right? If you look at car manufacturers, my father used to say, only buy American cars. And now it's like, I say, well, Dad, what is an American car? The brakes are from China, and everything is these different components. It's much easier today, theoretically, to be buying all these car components, right? Engines, brakes, steering wheels, dashboard displays, door locks, everything else, and then creating sort of a much more consumer-centric experience where maybe back to your question, maybe that's really what consumers want. We want that dumb screen where I can project from my phone onto that screen. I can walk out of the car and get that information back on. If it's really what we want, I'm just wondering, and this is obviously, the only disruptive way I see this all happening is if you can, if these kind of disruptive car manufacturers or car assemblers, and I don't know how that happens, but anyway.
Just to follow up, to me, this is identical to what carriers do. They're both on live, remember all the services, all the feature phones, and then what happened? Apple did it correctly, and it all disappeared. Same, in my view, is going to exactly happen to the cars. The guys that do it will be in business, the ones that don't, won't.
Another way to think about it is, if the Internet of Things vision plays out, your cell phone won't be the hub anymore in 10 years, right? So don't forget that. The idea is that everywhere you go, every device is itself connected, and the relevant information is being displayed on that device for that use case, for that time and place, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a watch, you'll have your car, you'll have your fridge, you'll have your wallet, whatever it is, but it's not, right now we're powering everything by our phones because that's the only real powerful portable device, right? But
yeah. So I think I do think there's some truth in it is the future of the cloud, right? That and I've seen it, and you'll hear this term virtualization over the next couple of years, and a lot of the old school guys here remember, you can do VAX machines or centralized computing. That's what the cloud is at the end of the day, centralized computing somewhere else, but not on the device. And these are just dumb display terminals with a powerful GPU and a fat pipe to have displays come to this. And I think Ankur's kind of right a little bit about that. Wherever you go, kind of this the creepiness of the internet is that it knows who you are, and you're going to have this really customized experience when you show up at home and being greeted by some Susie the computer. Yeah. So, but let's go to some other questions in the back there. Yeah, the glasses.
So, a question for the panel. In 10 years, what's your prediction on how many devices or sensors in a car are going to require connectivity of some kind?
Global, regional, by brand?
No, just in general, right? So if you think of a house, right? 10 years ago, we probably had maybe 2-3 connections at home. Now we probably have over 10 to 20, right? What's going to happen to the car in 10 years?
So the question was, how many different devices need connectivity, or at least what data streams are coming out of the car, right? So we talked about a few before, right? Location is one we like a lot today, telematics. And I think as you start getting into car-to-car, vehicle-to-vehicle communication, especially if you think about, a mesh network of cars driving around on the road, there's a whole bunch of, I think, data points that they're going to want to share with each other in some localized net, right? Because I want to know the car in front of me is braking, I don't care about a car a mile away. So I think there's a lot of that information that goes peer-to-peer. So I don't know the actual number, but those are the three categories that I would see. It's kind of vehicle information, sort of the car telematics stuff that the manufacturers may want, and then also the location information. Maybe there's more of it.
So my prediction
And infotainment, sorry.
IP addresses in a car.
Well, I don't think it has to be separate IP addresses, right? Because these are just streams of data probably collected by a hub inside the car, and they're doing smart things with that. I don't see it as having 10 devices in the car, all with their own, IP address, network connection, and bandwidth usage.
Or sensors, right? Because you're going to have different manufacturers. They're each going to want a sensor in there to give them back information on how that particular thing is doing.
Even still, think about it the way it works on your phone. So you've got many apps on your phone. And they all require different, information, maybe different sensors, everything else. And the software is running on the phone. So in the same way, the software may run on a hub. The software may be written by 10 manufacturers running on a hub in a multi-threaded environment or a real-time operating system. And then that hub will have connectivity probably, as opposed to expecting to have, I just think the logistics of that become untenable.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, if I go by your definition, then everything's connected, right? I mean, there's a reason to have everything connected. They're not going to be separate IP addresses. They'll all just be talking through one, data stream essentially. But yeah, I mean, I've got tire manufacturers that want to know how long the tires have been on the road, right? I mean, look at airplanes, right? Everything is censored, so it's the same concept. That's coming to the car industry. And the only thing I was going to say for Oliver was, it's all well and good, right? I mean, and I get Ankur, we're pushing data or pushing the CPU processing part of to the device, right? But the reality of the situation is that, okay, my wife is up north in Michigan, right? I can't even make a phone call to her, right? She's got no cell phone service, right? I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, absolutely nothing. It's baffling to me. I feel like I'm in the land of Luddites, right? I mean, here you're blessed with probably 5G, right? But we got nothing. There's no connectivity. Can't even make a phone call. And that's true in many parts of the world, right? I mean, you go to Europe, and Europe 10 years ago was way ahead of us, right? They had one standard. It was all great. But frankly, you round a corner, and you're like down to like 2G. I mean, it's crazy. I can't even. I always bug my European colleagues and say, "What happened to you guys?" Right? I mean, you're leaders. So, but that's the reality, right? I mean, we can say we want the smartphone to be the device, but the network is not there, right? I mean, look at Verizon and AT&T. 99% coverage of the population, right? That's not the landmass, the population.
Hey guys, so something just popped in my head because somebody mentioned mesh network, and that is something interesting because how many people know what a mesh network is here? All right, wow, we got so many geeks here. All right, so mesh networks, how important are they going to be over the next 10 years? And regardless of automatic, cars and auto driving cars, etc. But just on the connectivity, sharing bandwidth, etc. How important are mesh networks going to be?
Huge. I think first of all, when you look at Qualcomm, all join, all play, all seen, there are a lot of things happening on that sense, which is very, very unique. And as you said, we're going to have more personal devices. I think everybody in the panel said that too. And devices being connected in a vehicle that is a space that 3, 4, 2 people are together, those will be much more relevant. But at the same time, as you come to, let's say, beacons or retail, that's going to change all that too. So we see a lot of things will be around, along with the mesh networks, around security. How do you make these e-transactions? So the commerce and discovery. And from the car maker point of view, that could be one way to get around the wireless carrier roadblock. And we talked about how much you want to pay and so on and so forth. That's one way to get out of it. And I mean, we can talk more. Anybody else?
Right. We're seeing a lot of mesh networks being deployed right now. I mean, when you're dealing with any kind of smart parking systems that kind of know who's in a space, what's in a space, when's the space open, how do you do payment for that space, those are all mesh networks that are getting deployed around the city. The car's talking to them.
Are you seeing anything in mesh networks?
I mean, mesh networks traditionally means something like wireless connectivity on a protocol where things can route and pass information around. But more generally, it's sort of a multi-party peer-to-peer, whether it's over TCP/IP or Bluetooth, low power, whatever. And definitely, I think we're seeing a lot of that, right? We're seeing a lot of. It used to be with PubNub, people would, it's a publish-subscribe metaphors. People would publish data from the server and subscribe from the device, and that was the 99% use case. That's totally changing right now. So right now, we're seeing a lot of publishing and subscribing from end device to end device. In-home automation, we're seeing it in connected car. All these really interesting use cases and ways we hadn't really thought of before. I guess, from a broad perspective, that's definitely a mesh network. And definitely as these end devices get so much more powerful and smart, the server now acts as what we like to call the traffic cop model, right? So before, all these data streams go to your server, the server does some stuff and then sends it back to other devices, right? And as as users scale and as devices scale, this doesn't work anymore. Your server architectures just really aren't meant for that. At least they're not designed that way. So now what you're seeing are these, I guess, pseudo meshes where the devices are talking to each other, right? Cars are talking to each other. The servers are listening and sort of stepping in when they need to. That's hence the traffic cop model. I'm changing the permissions on this stream. I'm changing the business rules over here, but I'm no longer in the flow. And I think, honestly, if you kind of extrapolate out, all these connected devices, and we talk about this explosion of connected devices, that's the only way that these things are ever going to scale, rather than expecting these massive server farms to be in the middle of that data flow, right? So yes, mesh networks, I think, in that broader sense of the word, are exactly where things are going.
Let's do one more question, guys. Yeah, you, blue dress. Yeah. Speak loud.
So as a consumer, something that I'm concerned with for like a future car is a car that can basically tell me things that are going wrong in it in terms of maintenance. It just notifies me if something breaks down. In terms of safety, if someone's driving around with like a car that has a recall, knowing and stuff where that car is. What are your thoughts on where that's going to go in the future in terms of notifications for like maintaining car maintenance?
The check engine light's not doing it for you?
Really big example, Paul Walker, something was wrong with that car, really expensive car, something was wrong, they notified him, maybe he could be alive today, something like that, something that can save lives, basically.
You guys work with a bunch of these guys that plug in like.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. That's a huge thing, right? The OEMs are all working on that. That's actually an easy problem. The pseudo mesh networks thing, I'm still getting my head around. But yeah, absolutely, it's a big thing. We're even looking at things that are doing predictive maintenance, even, right? So that it's not going to just be it's caused a problem. It's actually going to predict, like, hey, we think you are going to have that problem, and you need to come to the dealership to get it fixed. Same thing with recall notices. These are huge things, and trying to automate that. Now, whether you and I trust the dealer, right, to get it fixed, that's a whole nother issue. But they have a vested interest because, frankly, most OEMs, most people don't realize this, maybe you guys do, but they don't make money off of selling you the car. They actually make money off of the service of the car. So that's actually a huge financial incentive for them to fix that issue that you just mentioned. So.
That's cool. All right, guys. You guys are welcome to hang out. We still have some refreshments left. I'd like to give applause to the panel here, guys. Special thanks for Tizen, MoPub, and HARMAN for tonight for sponsoring. And PubNub. What did I say?
MoPub.
Boy, it's been a long day. PubNub. And look forward to seeing you guys September. M Health. See you guys. Thank you. See you guys.
Okay. It's like